Today we're going to create a color swatch for our restaurant using Photoshop. In Photoshop, I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to choose Custom because I want my color swatch to be 3 inches wide. Make sure I come over here and click on the drop down for inches. I may need to set that back to be 3. Okay, with a height of 1, and because I'm just planning on this going to the screen, a resolution of 72 is fine. If I wanted to go to print, I would choose 300. RGB color with a background of white, click on Create. I can use the Control+ keys on my keyboard to zoom in and Control- to zoom out. Let me get this a little bit bigger. I'm going to put each of my color swatches into its own layer. I will create the first color swatch by going over to the bottom of the Layers panel and clicking on the New icon, which is just to the left of the trash can. It looks like a piece of paper that's kind of curled up. Once I have my new layer, I choose my Marquee tool by either clicking on the Marquee tool with my mouse or by pressing M on my keyboard. Coming to the top left corner of my image, holding down my Shift key, I will click and drag to select the first square. Down in the bottom of my toolbox, I have my foreground and background color. I will double click on my foreground color to choose my first color. I'm going to choose a basic red. And then in my toolbox, I'm going to go to the paintbrush tool. If my paint bucket tool is not there, you might see the gradient tool. If the gradient tool is there, press and hold on the gradient tool until you fly out the tools and can select the paint bucket. Come over to my selected area and click, and I get my first square created. I'll repeat that process for the next 2 swatches, coming down and creating a new layer, using my Marquee tool by pressing M, holding down my Shift key, selecting the next area over, let me hit Control-D to start over. I'll hit Control-D to start a new selection. Now I will press the Shift key down, select the next one, choose my next color. I'm just going to choose a basic blue, paint bucket, and hit Control-D to deselect. With my mover tool, I can move that tool. You might want to check right now that that box is independent of your first one. If I click on my layer 1, I can move the layer 1 independent of my layer 2. That's because I have them on separate layers. Notice when I click on the layer 1, it's always behind layer 2 because of the order that I have in my layer panel. If I move layer 1 above, it would be above layer 2. Since they're not overlapping, that doesn't really matter, but just so you understand how the layers work. Let's create the third box, which will be your accent color. I will again click on a new layer, grabbing my Marquee tool, holding down the Shift key, selecting my remaining space, and choosing, in my case, sort of a charcoal color, and I will paint bucket in my last selection. Notice that that is not completely on the edge, but since I have it in its own layer, I can move it wherever I want. Control-D will deselect. If I need to resize a layer, I can hit Control-T for transform. You notice that I get the handlebars, and I can resize each layer independently. I can press Enter if I want to keep that, or Escape to be done with it. The last step will be, after I've created my 3 swatches, is to save it. When I go to File, Save As, if I save this as a Photoshop file, I want to go into this PC and into my documents and into my computer applications folder. If I save this as color swatches, or simply colors if you'd like, it's going to default this to be a Photoshop file. If I have that be a Photoshop file, that'll allow me to edit my layers later. However, it will not allow me to put it into my Google document. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file, and click on yes. I want to maximize my compatibility, but I also want to save it as a JPEG file. So I will come into my file save as, leaving my file name the same, but going down under save as type and changing that to be JPEG. Once I do that and hit save, you can leave the quality of the JPEG at the default and click on OK. I can then insert that color swatch into my restaurant selection.